Like the salty admirals and great battleships of their namesakes, the Thousand Islands ply the waters of the St. Lawrence River, patrolling a border point in remembrance of a time when the shores were in conflict 2 centuries ago. But the Thousand Islands have a much deeper history. To discover this history, I stopped at the Frontenac Arch Biosphere Network office just outside the town of Ivy Lee. I spoke with Don Ross, Vice Chair of the Reserve.
Well, the story of the Thousand Islands actually begins about 1.5 billion years ago. There was a set of mountain ranges that grew in this region as continents collided. As grandiose as the Himalayas or the Rockies of today, mountains wear down to the point where all that's left are the roots of those ancient mountains. The Frontenac Arch is an arm that connects the Adirondack Mountains to the south of us to the Canadian Shield to the north. Lake Ontario originally flowed southward out the river at Oswego and down into the Hudson Valley and off to the Atlantic coast. But as the land rose after the last ice age, they still had to escape somewhere, and they began to flow out across the top of the Frontenac Arch, and so that the 1,000 hilltops became 1,000 islands.
The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization declared the Frontenac Arch a World Biosphere Reserve in 2002.
The reason that it's a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve is because of the ecological diversity. 1/3 of the species at risk in the whole province are found just within in the Biosphere Reserve. The Frontenac Arch and the St. Lawrence River Valley converging here put us at that crossroads of the continent in a sense. For migrations of plant and animals. And they're kept here today, often in small remnant populations. This has been an area that has been traded upon, traveled across, settled by, warred over by all sorts of cultures. These migration routes for plants and animals were also migration routes and trade routes for people, and it brought a lot of different cultures into contact. Stone and chert and whalebone tools from the Atlantic coastal region, Caribbean seashells, copper tools and knives from the Yellowknife, pottery types and stone implements and so forth that had their origins far to the west of here. The ice ages, as you say, have only been off this part of the landscape for 10 to 15,000 years. There's a campsite in the region that was discovered that goes back over 9,000 years. One of the first to see and name the area was good old Samuel de Champlain. The story goes as he stood on the north shore there and said, "What's all that I see in the distance?" Many, many islands, and so he called it Les Mille Îles, the 1,000 Islands. After the American War of Independence, and people that were loyal to the British cause were called loyalists and driven out, we had a big influx of people from eastern seaboard states, in particular Vermont and New Hampshire.
Buried in this family cemetery is the founder of LaRue Mills, William LaRue, his wife Abigail, and 6 of their 9 children. LaRue was a United Empire Loyalist settler, born in Albany, New York in 1760. He came to this area in 1790 and established a sawmill and gristmill on the creek nearby.
If you travel around the landscape, there's still a lot of small mills and mill sites that are there. They were the industrial hubs of a lot of the communities. Well, they could pretty well be self-contained and supply soup to nuts in a very broad sense to the community and the surrounding region. And that story kind of repeats itself in many, many places around the landscape.
The Thousand Islands earned their fame during the Gilded Age, when American elites and cultural icons in the late 19th and early 20th century discovered its natural beauty as a place to escape city life.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.